Hello everyone. Today we're going to discuss the Grandmaster's relationship with the bird opening. The bird opening. Bird's opening begins with F4 and was named after a player named Henry Edward Bird back in the 1800s who specialized in this opening. And the basic ideas in this opening is for white to take over the dark squares in the center. Okay, so white's early opening moves beginning with F4, concentrate primarily on the dark squares and tend to neglect the light squares at the beginning. So um, there's a few famous games in this line, and we're going to look at a few of those, and then we're going to jump in our time machine and look at current Grandmaster practice, both for and against. Again, we're not, being gimmicky on this channel and saying, "Oh, you're gonna win with the birds," or you know, or how to smash the birds and all this stuff with black. So we're gonna look at it from both sides. But basically, what we can say is factual is that it's not a serious opening at top level chess, and hopefully after this little survey, you'll see why and judge for yourself. But it is very popular at lower and amateur levels, and simple. I think one of the reasons is very simple to learn. The concepts are straightforward, and again, the plan involved is really one dimensional, and I think that's one of the reasons why you don't see it too much at grandmaster level. Is the plan is too primitive and straightforward to really um, lead anybody astray, so to speak. If you're the black player, birds opening. Okay, start out with F4. This game we're gonna look at Lasker Bauer, 1889, and we're gonna just run through it because we had a lot to cover, and I just want to just touch on the highlights of this opening real quick so that we can see. So again, we see F4 classical response with D5, E3 was played, Knight F6, B3. So again, you see the control of the dark squares, or the emphasis rather by white on the dark squares, right? With the pawn on E3, pawn on F4, and then the intention of bringing the bishop to B2, E6, bishop to B2, bishop E7. Lasker brings the bishop to D3. Why? Because he's not planning on blocking his bishop on B2 with D4. And then he doesn't want to have this bishop here. Figures it might be a little passive. So what he does is he brings the bishop here, right, to other, and where it's touching here on the king side. It also leaves the diagonal open if he wants to bring the queen over there later. And say after knight f3, g5, it just is a little more flexible. The downside is it does block this pawn if he does want to advance, and also this bishop can become vulnerable to possible attacks later on. So b6 is played, knight f3, bishop b7, knight c3. Now, of course, he's blocking his own bishop, but this is temporary. Okay, this knight is going to move. Okay, knight bd7, castle, castles, knight e2, c5, knight g3. So we see that part of the plan of concentrating on the dark squares, that's part one of the plan. Part two is to organize an attack on the king side. And that's basically the ideas in the bird's opening. Okay, so all of that emphasis on the dark squares pays off. E5 is under control of white, which is often the prelude to a king side attack. Knight takes, bishop takes, queen c6. Now the problem with this move, of course, he would like to take that bishop and then take the pawn, but the knight would be captured immediately. And after bishop takes f6, g takes f6, then white is basically winning after this and this threat here and threat here is too much to handle. Okay, so queen c6 was played, and of course we had the bishop and queen lined up, so he wants to play some kind of discovery, of course, and mate, right? Queen e2, Lasker nips that in the bud, and also this idea too. So a6, knight h5. What is knight h5 about? Removing defender of the king side. Okay. He not only wants to remove a defender from black's king side, he clears the diagonal. So upon capture, the queen can come in, and now you see the purpose of this bishop on d3, because mate will be threatened. Besides that, you have ideas later on also of bringing these rooks up to the rook up to the third rank. So look what happens now. Knight takes h5, which of course is a mistake. Right? But without mistakes, this game would not be famous. Perhaps better was a move like rook fd8. Again, white is still better at this point. His strategy is a success. If rook fd8, we just trade knight takes and just bust open the position. And this is good for white also. But instead, Bauer wanted to be on the other side of immortality, and he played knight takes h5, and Lasker struck like lightning. He didn't waste time capturing, because after just capturing right here and threatening mate, black has the resource f5. Then after rook f3, threatening to go here, queen e8, and then the queens get traded off, and black can probably get out of the wilderness. But understanding what is at stake here, Lasker played the fast move. Bishop takes h7 check. After king takes h7, queen takes h5 check, king g8. And here's the famous double bishop sacrifice. Just opening up everything. Why? Because you have the rook here. Okay, that's one of the joys of having a pawn on f4. Now the rook can just come up here and come across. So king takes g7, g4, rook f3, threatening rook h3, e5. Right, only move e5 to bring the queen over. And the rest of the game is just history. Okay, attacking two pieces. And of course, Lasker went on to win. Black put up some resistance, but it's too much. Too much firepower from white. And that is your birds opening. That's like your basic idea, and that is your model game that is probably shown in every book on the birds opening. Okay, now let's fast forward and look at modern practice. What I've noticed in my research is that black at the GM level basically responds to this in 3 different ways. Primarily, there's many different responses, but black primarily responds either with the move g6, d5, or c5. Okay, and each move has its different ideas. So we're going to start with the move c5. Okay, many players who play the Sicilian defense against e4 will respond c5 to the birds. The reason is because it's easy to transpose to an superior version for black, inferior for white version of the Sicilian defense, such as a Grand Prix attack, which is not known to really be problematic for black. And so many Sicilian players will simply just play c5. So in this game, Dragic versus Timoshenko from 2008, at the c5, knight f3, knight c6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, castle, knight f6, d3, castle, knight a3, Rook b8, and there's that typical queenside, um, queenside attack on this in the Sicilian. c3, d6, king h1, bishop d7, bishop e3, b5, bishop g1, queen c7, and queen d2. And these players agree with the draw, even though here I think black is already slightly better. After b4, I mean, this is good. This is good, especially after c takes and rook takes b4. But the players agreed to a draw. But as you will see, black had absolutely no problems there whatsoever in the position. In this game, Nepomniachtchi versus Wojciech. This is a rapid game from 2014. c5 was chosen, but not with the idea of playing a reversed Sicilian. Idea was different from Wojciech. This idea is to play the Dutch defense in reverse. Let's look how it went down. So g3, and if you know about the Dutch defense as black, you see that white is going for a reversed Leningrad Dutch formation. So g real quick, this is for my beginners out there. Here's the Dutch defense as black. Here's the Leningrad variation. And play. Okay, that's your Leningrad variation. You know, it'll go knight c3, d6, and so on. So just look at that position. Now, let's go back to the game. Okay, there it is. Now let's go back to the game. Okay. So after 5 castles, knight c6, and now you can see it's a reversed Leningrad Dutch. So sometimes black plays c5 in order to just play reversed Sicilian with rook b8, a6, b5, etc. And sometimes black will play this as a reverse Dutch. So he's playing as if he had the white pieces. Knight f6, knight c3, castle, e4, which is a very important move in the Dutch. It's black. Black, you will be striving to get e5 in. D takes, queen takes d1, rook takes d1 from Nepomniachtchi. Now in the endgame, and nice move by Wojciech here. Knight takes, f takes. So he temporarily sacks the pawn. And after knight g4, he had no problems in this position. And so now white just has an isolated pawn. It's a little bit more active, but it wasn't enough to, basically give black too much to worry about. And Wojciech wind up drawing the game in 53 moves. So that's another game with c5, but with a slightly different approach. And that was to play the Dutch defense in reverse as opposed to a Sicilian. This game featured Magnus Carlsen, pre-World Championship Magnus Carlsen, with the black pieces versus a player named, his last name is spelled L-I-E, and he was rated 25-29 with the white pieces. This took place in 2007. The reason why I'm showing you this game is because here's another twist on the opening. And this is what makes this opening tricky, because there's many different transpositions, many different ways that you can approach it with the black pieces. But I'm trying to explain the different approaches so that you can understand what you're getting into. When you face it, you should pick an approach that you like and stick with it. So if you like playing the Sicilian, stick with that approach. If you want to play it as reverse Dutch, stick with that approach. but don't like bounce around, or don't be unaware that that it's basically like a different opening. Kind of know what you're getting into. So Carlsen plays c5, knight f3, knight f6, d3 here, right? Now knight c6. So we have some type of Dutch setup, but Carlsen's gonna play this here like a Sicilian, but then the game is gonna transpose. So e4, okay, by the player with the white pieces. I like how Carlsen plays this. He strikes back in the center with d5. Now he's gonna change this. This causes the structure to be changed because e takes just equalizes too easily for black. Okay, so e takes d5, knight takes d5. That's child's play. So he plays e5, drives the knight back. Knight goes to g8. Don't be worried about the loss of time here because the position is closed. So it doesn't really, there's nothing that white can do to really exploit the loss of time, like by jumping on black or anything. But watch how Magnus Carlsen is going to um, use this structure to come out with the superior version of a French advanced variation. Okay? It's almost like a Carol Khan advanced variation or a French advanced variation. But watch the position in a few moves. Bishop e2 is played, knight h6. Again, if you know anything about the French advanced variation, you know this knight many times will wind up on this square, and it's about pressuring this d4 square. Normally in the advance, c3 and d4 would have been played already. This is actually better for black because black already has control over the square. White's not even contesting it. So castle, he gets the bishop out of the pawn chain. This is why I say it's kind of like Carol Khan here. Again, this is good. This is all good for black. Knight g5. Trades off the bishop, no problem. And now he plays e6. Queen h5. Queen e7, just reinforcing f7. Preparing queenside castling. Knight c3. Queenside castle from Carlsen. Bishop takes d2. There's no pawn on d4 to worry about, so Carlsen just simply attacks in the center with f6. D takes, g takes. So now Carlsen has more control over the center, and he has the open g file. Okay, the guy sacrificed a piece. He didn't want to play knight f3. Play could have went knight f5, rook ae1, rook g8, and Carlsen, black, is in the driver's seat here. So Carlsen went on to win. So let's move on to our next move by black. So as you can see, c5 is perfectly acceptable if you're a Sicilian player or you just like those type of positions, whether it's a reverse Dutch or you like positions with c5 that you feel comfortable in those type of structures, or c5 is definitely a good move for you. This next move, g6, is another great option that a lot of grandmasters use. It adds more flexibility to the situation because if you notice, white can play e4 or almost anything at this point. And it just again, its major strength is its flexibility. You can end up in a reverse Dutch. You can still end up in a Sicilian. And I'll just show you this brief example. This game was between Heinrich Danielson, who is one of the main proponents of this opening today, and against Lars Bo Hansen. And this took place in 1997. So after g6, knight f3 was played, bishop g7, e4, d6. Okay, so we have a lot of flexibility here. And again, the game could have just easily transposed into some type of Indian defense or something after d4. But Play knight c3, and there's c5. So you see how now we're in some type of Sicilian. Bishop b5, bishop d7, a4, knight c6, castle, and um, black actually went on to win this game. He equalized, but I just want to show you this position so you can see how g6 can kind of morph into various things depending on white plays. So if you want to be a little more flexible, hiding your intentions, or you have a little bit more experience, maybe a higher rated player than the opponent, uh, g6 is a good option also. Another quick one, again from Bent Larson, 2620 versus Lubomir Kavalek, 2565 from 1973. Kavalek played g6, knight f3, bishop g7, e4, and there it is again, c5. So just basically holding back and just to get more information from white to see what he's going to do. Bishop e2 from Larson, knight c6, castle, d5, d3, e6, and you can again see the Sicilian themes, and this is more of like a pure Sicilian. And we see the attack coming on the queen side. Okay, and this game wind up being a draw, but again we see black just equalizing with no problem against f4. This game between Chernyshov and Cheskovsky took place 2002, again with g6, and I'm just using this as an example to show you what can happen, the flexibility. d6 was played, and this time white decided to just change the opening completely. So if you play g6, you have to be mindful of these possibilities. Okay, so we wind up with a 4 pawns attack here. This last game I want to show you in the g6 variation is between a player named Shagayev and with the white pieces and Alexander Morozevich with the black pieces. And this is from a blitz game in 2016, actually in July. g6 from Morozevich, g3. So we see Shagayev has shown intentions to go into Leningrad, reverse Leningrad, Dutch, and here is the flexibility right here showing. Morozevich plays h5. So now h5 might look a little weird, but again, if you're familiar with the Dutch defense, there are many anti-Dutch systems where where white will throw the h pawn up early. So it's just having a basic familiarity with that will kind of ease your mind a little bit. For instance, I'll just use this as an example. Sometimes you'll get systems like this. Let's say you get these type of things going on, or you get a d4, f5, bishop g5 right away, g6, and then a quick h4. You see? So again, this is with the white pieces, but just to give you a mental picture of what it looks like. And if you're familiar with the idea from the black side, then when you see it in reverse, you can pick it up quicker. You're like, oh, okay, this move is not from Mars. This is a normal thing that happens in this opening, but the pieces are just merely reversed. So when you see this early h5, it's not like, oh my goodness, what's going on? It's just, a normal thing that does. So this game continued, knight f3, d5, c4, d4. So it takes on a lot of themes. You have this reverse Benoni theme with the wedge in the center. Rook g1 was played, knight c6, bishop g2, and the game went on. Very, very tactical game. It was a blitz game, by the way. But I just wanted to show you that last one, just to show you that with the move g6, there's a lot a lot behind it, and that just leaves more options on the table. So if you don't want all the risk all of that flexibility, then you might want to just play C5 or D5 right away and go into a system that you feel comfortable with. Like G6, favors the player that has greater experience, or maybe is a higher rated player and that can needs that extra room to be creative and maybe transpose and lead his opponent to some murky position. But if you're not that experienced, you don't want to play G6 because you can end up in King's Indian defense or something like that, or something that you didn't expect. Okay, the final variation that I'm going to discuss is D5, which I think is the most popular variation used by Grandmasters. So I was saying that it would go D5 would be the most popular response to F4, then G6, excuse me, then C5, and then G6. So D5 again has its little branches where the game can end up, depending on what white does, the game can end up in a full blown reverse Dutch defense. This game is from Nakamura, Hikaru, that is, with the white pieces versus Fedoseev, okay, from the FIDE World Rapid in 2014. And Nakamura had the white pieces, so F4, D5, knight F3, C5, just playing classical in center. And again, just imagine the players, the colors being reversed. So basically, black is playing the Queen's Gambit, and white is playing the Dutch defense. You get the same position. That way, you avoid confusion. There's a fianchetto, just like you would do as white. D3, and you get the exact. There's Queen E1, and black, there's a line with Queen E8. It's Queen B6. Again, with white, you get lines with Queen B3. The idea is to exploit this diagonal. So once you understand that, that's like a major building block to just understanding how to play against F4. Game with knight D4, knight A3, knight takes, rook takes, and here we go, exploiting the fact that this king is in the corner here. Fedoseev launches this attack with the H pawn, 1 and 2 prior, open his file. H3, of course, the idea is to keep the position closed after H4, then G4 would be played. Nevertheless, a little bit more weakening over here on the king side. Bishop F4, C4, and D4 was played. A couple of more moves, rook F1, castle, and then rook B1. And we see over here Nakamura trying to initiate his play on the queen side. A5 shuts him down a little bit, but weakens the B5 square. Queen F2, rook Fe8. Working on this powerful move right here. Again, is white. You try to play for E4 in many lines. And so a couple of more moves happen. E5, F takes, and black equalized effortlessly, and this game wind up being a draw. Here's another position. This game is from Peter Svidler versus Dmitry Yakovenko from 67th Russian Championship in 2014. Again, we see the reverse Dutch defense, basically. This time, D4 is played. And you notice that it's white. White usually plays D4 in these lines. So they're basically playing the same stuff in reverse. Knight A3, knight D5, and so on and so forth. And this game was also drawn. This game is interesting because after F4, D5, This game is between player Alexandrov, 2577, versus Jaguriov, 2665. And this is from 2016, a blitz game. This game is interesting because after D5, knight f3, bishop g4 was played. Now again, reversing the colors, you understand that bishop g5 is often played in the Dutch. With the colors reversed, for instance, d4, f5, and bishop g5 is an anti-Dutch system. Okay, sometimes you'll get this first, and then when black commits to the Leningrad, then you'll see these type of moves. But it also happens here also. I believe this is one of the strongest moves actually against the Dutch defense, but that's another subject, another topic. So f4, d5, knight f3, and there it is in reverse. e3, knight d7, and now there's a lot of pressure against the dark squares now. So h3 to basically find out what that bishop is going to do. Gets rid of the knight. Queen takes f3, e6, and b3. And the reason why that move is significant, the bishop takes f3, is because I told you at the beginning, in the bird's defense proper, again, we're not talking about the reverse Dutch defense, because that's like a different opening, really, even though it starts out the same with f4. In this bird's variant, it's really a little bit simpler than the Dutch. The birds, it's basically about controlling the dark squares, as you can see on the diagonal a1 to a8, h8, excuse me, and then the e pawn controlling d4, f pawn controlling e5. Then, of course, in conjunction with the knight on f3, hopping to e5, throwing the pawns up and conducting a kingside attack. That's basically what's going on there. The Dutch in reverse has some of the same plans, but is a little more sophisticated. But here, the player with the white pieces just opted for an old school classical birds variation. So that bishop removing the knight on f3 is very important because it fights against the strategy that white is trying to initiate. So bishop b2, again with the idea, controlling the dark squares. Bishop d6. Notice how how black is contesting the control here. Knight c3. c6. Possibly trying to stop the knight from coming here. c5, g4 is already up in the air. Again, the idea of kicking this knight to the curb. c6. c6 is a little more solid for black. So g4 comes, h6, h4, and we see a primitive but strong plan by white. Right? Let's control the dark squares, attack on the king side. And right here, white is not doing too bad. He's ready to castle queen side. Okay? Black has to be careful. Knight b6, g5, knight fd7, and knight e2. Pressure against on the dark squares, but again, remember I told you black is contesting the dark squares here. So e5. Play bishop h3, queen e7, again fighting for the center. Castle. Again, black is fighting for the dark squares in the center, so he wants to trade off this bishop. Is very important. Okay. White played bishop takes d7. Knight takes d7. And I'm not too sure about that move. I mean, he kind of helped black out a little bit, stabilize on the dark squares. So maybe instead of that move, what happens if he puts more pressure on the center here and forces the exchange? Okay, so he's about to take here. So perhaps play could go like this. The ideas of coming here. And I think white is not too bad here. He has an excellent bishop, a lot of space on the king side. But this game continued after bishop a3, bishop takes d7. And here, black castle queen side, and black had equalized by this point. And his strong center is definitely a major factor in that. So he kind of when he fought against black's concept and idea of taking over the dark squares, and this was why he was able to equalize. All right. So remember that idea in your games. Remember the difference between, again, your classical birds with that fianchetto bishop on b3 and taking over the dark squares and attacking on the king side, and the difference between that and your Dutch Dutch defense, which is a little more, has a little more class and nuance to it. Your birds is more on the primitive side. Okay. Okay, the last game I'm going to show is a game between a player named Injik, um, 2564, versus Conrad Holt with the black pieces, who was 2521 at the time. This is from the Dallas Fall FIDE Open in 2015. And the reason why I want to show this game is because white adopts another form of the Dutch defense, which is the Stonewall variation. So here we see that Conrad Holt obviously wants to go into a basic reverse Dutch structure. So he sets up the fianchetto already. Bishop g7, d4. There's your Stonewall. Okay, so white basically, in order to obtain full control of e5, is willing to give up e4 for the time being. Black, of course, will strive to regain control of e5 and thus break down the Stonewall. And usually once he breaks down the Stonewall, black is stuck with his backward pawn here, which becomes a liability. Knight f6, c4, and I'm already suspicious at this point, because normally, again, black and the Dutch Stonewall will have c3 being played to make it more solid. But now there are lines in the Stonewall as black where c5 does get played. So it's not out of the ordinary, but there is a downside that now the Stonewall can be attacked and leave a lot of pawn weakness here. But normally you would see a move like c3. So c4, black just castles. Knight c3. And now Conrad makes a bold decision. He just attacks in the center with c5. And I believe this is a good move. If the colors were reversed and black had played this way, playing early c5 in the Stonewall, white would try to play c4 also. But actually c4 would already be on board, because you would have played d4, say for instance d4, f5, and c4 would be there already. So remember that black is trying to play as if he had the white pieces. He's a tempo down, but he is judged that he can still play c5 and get away with it here. So he's not really worried about this move, d takes c5. You could play this move right here, knight e4, and with this double attack on this knight here. So for example, if he tried to play c takes d5, he would just be losing after knight takes c3. Or if he tried to play knight takes e4, which he played in the game, then simply d takes e4, queen d8, rook d8, knight d4, knight a6. And this pawn is not going to stand for long. So the game continued. Bishop d2. Knight takes c5. So we see that the Stonewall is now gone for white, and that he's stuck with this backward e pawn. In this case, black's dark square bishop is nice. An easy development for his light square bishop. This rook can easily come out to c8, and black has no problems. This is like a desperate type of move, castling queenside. This helps facilitate black's development with bishop g4, right? Getting out with tempo. Rook e1, and black is just way better in this scenario here. Needless to say, and then he completes his development with rook ac8, and that's all I have to say on that game. So that's just basically how black dealt with this this incarnation of the Stonewall defenses, just by playing as if he had the white pieces, using good calculation, temporarily sacrificing the pawn on c5, and getting it back with the good position. And of course, you know, the story would be too perfect if black went on to win this game, but instead white was able to hold the position, and white wound up drawing in 42 moves. All right, so now that was a long video, so now it's time for the conclusion. Remember, against f4, you have three main moves that Grandmasters will play. One is d5, okay. One is g6, and the other is c5. And like I said earlier, just to reiterate real quick, c5 is, if you play Sicilian already, you know, it's fantastic, although you can't transpose the other things. But if you play Sicilian, that's probably the move for you, because you can get white into Grand Prix attacks, and you know, which is basically an inferior variation of the Sicilian for white. If you want to be more flexible, you're a real strong player, and you kind of want to outplay your opponent and get more information to see what he's going to do, you can play g6. But just be aware that you might end up in King's Indian defense positions, you know, because the opponent can transpose, you know, into different openings easier here after g6. But g6 is also one of the main choices. And d5 finally is probably the most popular choice. Just simply playing the position as you had the white pieces in the reverse Dutch defense. Then next point is just remember also that you have your birds proper, which I consider like f4, followed with the plan of e3 and b2, and fianchettoing your dark square bishop on b2, and basically taking over the dark squares and then launching a king side attack via castling queen side. That's your primitive plan, and that's your basic birds setup. Whereas the other plan is basically playing the Dutch, which is a little more complicated. Usually the Leningrad, you'll see the reverse Leningrad, but sometimes you might see a Stonewall and other variants of the Dutch, classical. So, and then as far as playing the birds, a good antidote to the birds proper is basically trading off that knight on f3, as we saw in the one of the games, and contesting the white control of the dark squares by playing e5 yourself at some point. But being mindful, you know, being mindful of white's plan is, you know, half the battle. You understand that, you can just counteract the plan. So that's one of the reasons why you don't really see the birds too much, is because the plan is kind of too straightforward, and you can just counterattack it easily. The Dutch, a little more complicated, but again, you could just play as if you had the white pieces with black and get an equal position. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that video. Please like, subscribe. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you on the next one.